From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones. What has happened to the Conservative Party? The dominant force in British politics since the early 19th century is in 2025 almost having the last rites said over it.
Some senior in the Tory party, they said it's like a New Orleans funeral. There's colour, there's light, there's joy all around, but ultimately everyone is bidding farewell to a corpse.
As their annual conference gets underway in Manchester, Times political editor Steve Swinford on whether Kemi Badenoch is capable of political resurrection. The story today is the Tory party over? What is conference like for you? I've never been to a party conference in my life. Are you running around collaring people? Are you having dinners? Are you propped up at a bar somewhere surrounded by cabinet ministers and would-be cabinet ministers? I mean, how does it work?
So it's changed for me over the years. I'll tell you what it used to be like when I first started out reporting on politics.
Steve speaking to us from the Times' office in Westminster before heading north for conference.
I didn't really know anyone. I just ran around having coffees with people, trying to kind of make contacts and staying up very, very, very late because there's a late night drinking culture at every conference. So at Labour, they always used to have these extraordinary parties, normally hosted by the Daily Mirror. And, you know, the Tories have the Spectator Party is a big deal. The Tory party, they have loads of champagne and fizz, and you kind of got donors rubbing shoulders with MPs, running shoulders with journalists. And then the Tory one, all the social action happens in the hotel bar, which kind of goes on till the early hours of the mornings. There was this guy that used to work in Number 10 for the Tories back in the day who happened to be a kind of virtuoso pianist. So there would always be a point at like 3 or 4 in the morning when he would get out the piano. So, but like I say, it has changed for me. So in my younger years, I could do the longer stints and the drinking that comes with that. But now it is very much a place of business for me. So I am meeting people. My day starts very early. I have early coffees, breakfast, more coffees, lunches, more coffees, drinks, dinner. And I am looking at each conference in this role, in this current job, at about 20 to 30 meetings. And the things I'm looking for from that are twofold. To do my job, you have to be curious and interested in people. You have to want to know what's going on. But you're also, obviously, we're the Times. We're looking for stories. We're looking for what's going on under the kind of heartbeat of things. What's happening behind the scenes? Who's up? Who's down? Who's manoeuvring? And it varies from conference to conference. So I still think the most extraordinary conference I've ever been to, which it will never get beaten, was the one where Liz Truss reversed effectively her mini budget, when the whole thing fell around her.
The fact is that the abolition of the 45p tax rate became a distraction from the major parts of our growth plan. That is why we're no longer proceeding with it. I get it, and I have listened.
And that was literally a kind of physical, real-time collapse of government. I remember having lunch with Kwasi Kwarteng, and he was assuring us that the mini budget was going to stay. A few hours later, it was all gone, and people were running around like lunatics, and it was very, very chaotic. So that one won't be matched. Party conferences are weird. They don't reflect the reality. It's about galvanising the faithful, but at the end of it, Kemi Badenoch could have done the best speech in the world ever. They are staring down the barrel of absolutely appalling poll ratings, which haven't shifted and won't shift because of that conference.
No.
But look, they are going to give it everything they've got at this conference to try to get something positive out of it.
It's incredible to think that this is her first party conference as leader. It seems like she's been leader for a good long while. How would you rate what she has done? Rewind for us. What has she actually been doing in the past year? What has she achieved, do you think?
So she's got this really curious phrase that she's using and has used throughout her interviews over this conference period, which is, she says that when I came to the Conservative Party, I inherited a distressed asset. And what she means by that is that the Conservative Party as an organisation was in failure. And that failure was arguably across the organisation, from the grassroots all the way up to the MPs and ministers. And she says, my job is to turn that round. And look, there are some aspects where she has succeeded. So she has raised significant sums of money. Everyone said that there would be a mass desertion of donors to reform. That hasn't happened. But on any empirical basis, it's gone badly. So she came in, and I think that the gap with reform was relatively narrow. That gap is now a chasm. They have gone backwards under her leadership. Now, how much that is her fault and how much that is the fault of her predecessors, of the legacy, is an open question. But clearly, you've got a position where the Tory brand is deteriorating. And I think there are also issues with her personal polling. When you look at that, there's still a big chunk of voters who don't know who she is, but of those that do know who she is, they don't tend to like her. How can she break through? Should she have done more to kind of change things up? She keeps saying that I thought Labour would have a 2-year honeymoon and that voters therefore wouldn't start wanting to hear from us properly until the end of that period. And as a result, when she started this arc of Parliament plan, which was, do you apologise for what's gone before in your first year? You start to develop some policy and feed that out in the second year, and you go hell for leather in years 3, 4 and towards the election. A lot of her MPs are saying that was completely the wrong strategy, that waiting to get out big things and to make a noise in an environment that is febrile as this, and when you've got an existential threat in the form of Nigel Farage and Reform UK, that is a fundamental problem. So that's the concern, that she basically has waited too long to do anything.
And is that upset or disgruntlement translating into people like Robert Jenrick and others being on manoeuvres? I mean, is she in a perilous position?
It definitely is perilous. So it's translated in two ways. There has been, beneath the bonnet of what she's done, a complete overhaul of the Conservative Party. So she removed, these are people, our listeners won't know who they are, but she removed all of her senior people and completely changed her way of doing business about 3/4 of the way through. So the people that have been with her from the off, they've all gone, either of their own volition or because she's wanted them to. And she has relaxed her grip. She's eased controls. So she is no longer trying to strangle and dominate everything, which she was at the beginning. She's now letting shadow cabinet ministers do what they want. People can go out and make a noise. Whether that's helpful or unhelpful, she has kind of let people off the leash a bit. So that's her response to this problem. And we are seeing a lot of that at conference. You're seeing some quite wide-ranging speeches, as I always put it, and some big offers from the Tories. But look, no, I mean, in the background, of course, the plotting is happening. There is literally a countdown clock until November on the internet that you can find, where they are counting down the days till people can mount a leadership challenge. She has been asked repeatedly, would you resign if the May elections next year go badly? And that is the pinch point. That's when things go really downhill, because it's one thing having a load of polls tell you it's bad. It's another thing when voters at the ballot box tell you it's bad. So that is the kind of coming point.
And we should say that countdown clock is because of Tory party rules. I mean, it seems like they change leaders like socks, but actually there is a sort of set period where she couldn't be challenged.
There's a set period where she couldn't be challenged, and she was protected and insulated from a challenge for a prolonged period. That protection period is nearly up, and people are going to start moving. I think there is a question of what people do, because the person who wields the knife doesn't tend to wear the crown. It's a real old truism. If Robert Jenrick was to come out and just go for her full-blooded, then that may present him with problems trying to unify the party and bring it back together afterwards. I think the far more likely course of events is that it waits till May, because no one will want the mantle of leading the Tories into a disastrous set of election results, and then things get very febrile indeed. But look, her people and they would argue it won't come to that. They would say they're going to be able to turn it around. They would say this conference, with all of these big offers that we've seen on climate change, on the ECHR, there's a big tax offer that's coming. So all of these things together, they think will change the dial. And the problem that she's going to face, if those polls don't start to move, if she doesn't get favourable recognition from this kind of blitz of policy announcements that we've got here, she's going to have a real problem. And I'm going to give you the other side for a minute. So this was someone senior who thinks that she's got to go. Someone senior in the Tory party who believes she's got to go. And they put it in this particular way, which is a very interesting metaphor. They said it's like a New Orleans funeral. There's colour, there's light, there's joy all around, but ultimately everyone is bidding farewell to a corpse. So that is the kind of temperature out there, that it may feel good now, they're arguing, but it's not, and it's going to go south very soon.
Steve, we're talking about the Conservative Party as their conference gets underway. You mentioned a moment ago the polling and how that's got worse under Kemi Badenoch's leadership. I mean, how bad is it at the moment?
It's really bad. The story that we all know, that Reform are top of the polls and they have actually extended that lead, that has got worse. They have gone further and faster than I think many of the leading pollsters believed that they could. They appear to be picking up big chunks of the Labour vote, but a far bigger chunk of the Tory vote. And adding to that is these defections. You are seeing there was a guy called Danny Kruger, who was a Tory MP, who was seen as a kind of bright, very able guy, well liked in the Tory party across the board. He's on the right of the party on some issues, on others in different places. But he left for Reform. He said, this isn't what my party's broken. And that was a big coup. And that actually is a much more significant defection than any of the others that we've seen so far. We saw Nadine Dorries go. She's a former Tory cabinet minister. That's fine. She has a kind of following in the Mail where she writes a column. So that's okay. And then we've also had people like Andrea Jenkins go over. She's now the mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. But Danny Kruger was a talent. He was seen as the future of the Tory party. So for him going, that has presented significant problems.
And he didn't just say that the party was broken. Didn't he say it was dead or something like that as well?
He said it was dead. He echoed the language that you've heard from Keir Starmer, that you've heard from Nigel Farage, that the Tory party is dead. And look, this will be part of the calculation, the unsaid calculation of people like Robert Jenrick and others who think perhaps that Kemi Badenoch may not be the right leader for the Conservative Party. If they go hard at her and if they weaponize and say you're terrible, there is a risk it just leads to more defections. You get more people leaving. And what people are thinking about tacitly, and this is the kind of state that the Tory party's in, they're thinking we need to ensure that we have MPs to lead, that we aren't diminishing the base of our power and our talent by having a massive civil war. So there is a bit of caution behind the scenes. So that is one of the challenges, that there is this existential issue facing the Tories and the defections to Reform.
And do you buy that when people say, once the most successful political party in the world actually is dead and everyone should jump ship and go somewhere else? I mean, do you genuinely foresee that?
No, I don't, because I think in politics money matters, right? And no one is really talking about this properly. It's what I was saying earlier, that there is serious money still going to the Conservative Party. There are long-standing Tory donors who remain committed to the party and are giving that money. Kemi Badenoch has done a lot of work on that personally, along with her husband Hamish. They've literally been courting the donors, often as a couple, to bring them in. And that means that there is life here. There is potential for the future, and there is young talent around the Tories. The name around conference that everyone is talking about is Katie Lamb. So she used to serve as a SPAD in the Home Office. She loved of musical theatre and did loads of that. But she's also, that's by the by, she has a hinterland, which is a rare thing in politics. But she's seen as very capable. She's on the right of the party. She's switched on. She's young.
Is she the one who met J.D. Vance recently at George Osborne's behest?
Right? So she met J.D. Vance, and she is seen as the kind of bright thing of the future. So I think the point is that as long as the money's there, the party will be there and there will be people to pick up the mantle. And the other thing that is worth both of us remembering is that Reform at the moment might feel like a juggernaut. It might feel unstoppable in the polls. I think it's 100 polls since April that it's topped. That's fine. But it is also, and this is definitely true, it is at this stage a single point of failure. It has one man that has public recognition. No one knows who anyone else is in Reform out there in the kind of broader real world. The polling suggests that there's virtually zero name recognition, but there is this guy, Nigel Farage. And as long as he's there, they're going to be a force and they're going to be very disruptive. but there is a world in which, let's say, there's a big civil war, Nigel Farage ends up taking a back seat. This could all go very wrong for them. So at the moment, it's a really difficult moment for the Tories, but I think there is a view that there's a longer term game here, a longer term battle. And the job is, I guess, to ensure that enough remains of the Conservative Party that it can have green shoots, that it can revive as a political force one day, whether that's under Kemi Badenoch, whether it's under her successor, who knows? But it is a long, hard road ahead.
And also, aside from Reform maybe being a one-man band, they are now in power in various parts of the country in terms of the number of councils they own. Do you think that's quite a risk for them that, I don't know, maybe 4 years down the line, say I'm living in Lancashire or somewhere, and I think, well, actually things haven't changed, my council's not very good, and, you know, you hold Reform to account for that in a way that you've never had to hold Nigel Farage's political grouping to account before?
It could be a risk potentially, but I think actually, look, I was once talking to a very senior guy that works for Starmer, who's responsible for like all of the kind of how do you deal with Reform, all that kind of stuff. And he was saying to me, the problem for Reform and Farage is it's just vibes. And you're just trying to attack vibes. You're trying to attack this guy who comes out, in his view, with ludicrous policies that don't have any kind of anchoring in reality. But it's just like, that is hard to punch through because it is just, you know, people don't mind the detail. They're not looking at the detail. We do at the Times. We forensically go through the detail of those policies, their practicalities, their costings, and we will continue to do that because they are the party at the top of the polls. But they are quite hard to attack, which is why you are seeing Labour pivot to this very personal and very aggressive tack on Nigel Farage as the man who doesn't like Britain, is not a patriot, and is essentially espousing racist policies.
I wonder what the Tories should do about that then, because, you know, there's been some suggesting that they should tack more to the right, ape some of these Reform policies if they're going down well, even if it is just vibes. What do you think they should be doing, and what are they thinking of trying?
I think the differentiation is really hard. I think if you look at where they are now, Reform and the Tories have an almost common policy platform on two key planks. One is leaving the ECHR, and the other now is climate change, a kind of repudiation of net zero. And there's barely any gap between them. The Tories haven't come out with a kind of full mass deportation strategy like Reform has, but they're getting close to it. And that's one of the problems that they need to delineate in policy terms. And the one area that I think they can delineate, and they do differ from, and is arguably, and I think probably is, Reform's biggest Achilles heel, is the economy. And if you look at all the polling again, everything you're seeing shows that Reform are not as trusted on the economy as certainly, you know, some of the other mainstream parties. Now, the Tories have a problem of their own on that because they've got the Liz Truss legacy, which means that voters don't particularly trust the Tories either on the economy. But you would have thought that is one area, if they can start to make some movements, really hard for them to kind of out-reform on migration. Although Kemi Badenoch is obviously giving it a go with a kind of more reasonable, palatable version of migration policy as she sees it, one that's been more thought through, one that considers the consequences and looks at the detail. But you would have thought potentially there's something they can do on the economy. So we will see how that plays out.
And do you think that will become easier as their time in office becomes a more and more distant memory? Like, are they sort of suffering with long Tory at the moment, where people can, you know, very quickly remember what happened the last time they were in charge, and particularly under Liz Truss, and actually, as we get closer to the next general election, they can seem a bit newer and fresher and not have all this baggage?
I think it's really hard for them, and because it is long Tory, as you describe it, is here to stay. So I'll give you a couple of pointers on that. One of them is, if you talk to people in the city, they still talk to you with a bit of glee about the moron premium that Britain is suffering from. What does the moron premium mean? It means that when traders look at the UK, because of the actions that Liz Truss took in the mini budget, when there was a kind of complete collapse in the financial markets, they believe that the UK is less predictable and valuable as a result, and it is much more volatile. The bond markets now go crazy with any kind of slight palpitation in policy, and that is a legacy of the Tories. That is an economic legacy that they are having to live down to this day. And the other point is a really simple one, which is, obviously, Liz Truss's premiership precipitated a situation where mortgages went up steeply. They went up dramatically, and it brought an early end. It would have ended anyway, but it brought a very early and abrupt end to the era of cheap fixed-term mortgages. And a lot of people have gone from, seen their mortgages double. They're paying thousands of pounds more, and that has a long tail. And then there's the other issue, which is connected to this, which is on migration, which is Boris Johnson. So you have both Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer now talking about the Boris wave. And what they mean by that is that the post-Brexit migration policy that came in under Boris Johnson led to a huge surge in the levels of legal migration. And so we went from a Tory party that had committed to reducing net migration back in the day when I started out to hundreds of thousands, less than 100,000, I think it got beyond 700,000 at one point. And that is politically absolutely toxic. So they've got two really toxic legacies to deal with on their hands. One, the economy and what happened with Liz Truss, and two, migration. And both are being weaponized effectively by Labour and Reform. So that is going to take years to recover from that, because they're two really significant events. And Kemi Badenoch has apologised for that, right? She has said that this is legacy, it went wrong. But it's probably not enough. People are still feeling it. And that's the challenge, trying to get the forgiveness of voters.
And just finally, Steve, I guess the point is that, especially if we're thinking about who might lead the next government, who might be the next Prime Minister, it's just far too soon to tell, isn't it? We've got years to go. It wasn't that long ago that the Tories won a landslide under Boris Johnson, or that Labour won a landslide only a year ago, and yet everything seems so different now. So who's to say what might happen in 4 years' time?
I thought Brexit would be probably the kind of peak chaos of my political career. I remember coming in and starting to work in the lobby under the coalition. It was all very stable. Then there was an election and it was all fine. And then Brexit just blew absolutely everything up. And ever since then, it's been complete carnage. So it's really unpredictable. It's really volatile. Anyone, including me, who tells you what's going to happen tomorrow, year's time, they don't know what they're talking about. It's far too unpredictable. We have an entire political system that at the moment is weirdly predicated on one man. And as I said, that could change, right? So anything can happen. We will give you and continue to give you from here the best insight as we can on a weekly and daily basis, but prepare for the unexpected, buckle up, because it is a hell of a ride and will continue to be.
And you're podcasting from the conference.
Yes, The State of It, which is our new podcast, is going to be broadcasting from the conference, and that is with myself. That is with Caroline Wheeler, the excellent political editor of the Sunday Times. That is with Patrick Maguire, he's the Times' chief political commentator, and Gabriel Pogrund, who's the Whitehall editor at the Sunday Times. They're all amazing journalists, and what we're trying to do is, without fear or favour, there is no political bias. You can, if you want loads of opinions, there are lots of podcasts where people do give opinions, and that's fine. We're going to take you inside the lunches that we have, inside the coffees, and tell you what people are actually saying and thinking. And we will give you scoops, we will give you insight, and we'll give you information. So that is the kind of mission statement for what we're trying to do, which we don't think anyone else is doing at the moment. And we hope listeners will enjoy it.
Steve Swinford, political editor of The Times. The new podcast you mentioned, The State of It, is available wherever you're listening to us. New episodes are available weekly. That is it from us today. Today's producers were Micaela Arneson and Olivia Case. The executive producer was Dan Box. Sound design and theme composition was by Maula Seto. And I'm Luke Jones. See you soon.